Luci Lampe is a mum of four, a trauma-informed sex and relationship coach, award-winning singer and songwriter, commercial actress and print model. And she's also a 3 times author.
When men allow themselves to really feel is the anger, is the rage. For women, we tend to go straight into sadness and kind of like victimhood. That's the shadow of that.
Her writing has been featured on the Huffington Post, Forbes, entrepreneur.com, CBS, and Fox.
The qualities of the sacred masculine, or the masculine, just the masculine, is very much that containment, not control, but this containment of this space where you feel safe. It's a space of safety. It's grounded. It's empty. It's everything and nothing all at once. The feminine is the fullness that fills that space. That's why they work so in union together.
After overcoming an autoimmune disorder and embarking on a deep healing journey and spiritual awakening during her husband's 2-year disability and depression, Luci returns with a bold message of love, courage, and freedom. From a man's perspective, is there anything we can do to accommodate this for her?
One big thing that men can do to support their partners, their female partners in this case, is...
Luci Lampe, absolutely delighted to have you here on the Modern Warrior podcast. I somehow stumbled across your page some time ago, and we've had to jump through several hoops to get you here on this podcast, and I'm delighted that we eventually managed to do so, because your profile is beyond description, I think. And it is unique, it's empowering, it is an absolute eye-opener in terms of some of the things you speak about so freely, so openly, so honestly. And you speak about many things that are quite taboo in today's society, and there's a lot of shame around some of these topics that you speak about. And I want to bring the listener on a journey where he or she can remove this shame and be liberated when it comes to sex and intimacy, and being at one with themselves so they can be at one with their loved ones, with their partners in those type of scenarios and in life in general. So an honor to have you here. And I want to open up this conversation by bringing it back, because although at the moment it seems like yourself and your husband have an absolutely incredible relationship, you seem very, very connected, very loving. It wasn't always that way, was it?
No, it was not.
You tell us about that.
Yeah, well, gosh, where do I begin? So we've been married for almost 17 years. So this fall, it will be 17 years, and we have 4 kids. And thank you. And when we met, we were the stereotypical, nice guy and good girl. And you know how that is. You've seen this a million times, I'm sure. And he was very athletic. He was in the military, but we met in college. We got married in college. We had our first kid a year later, still in college. I graduated with a 5-month-old and a husband. That was not my original plan. But we had a very different vision for our lives and for our marriage than what ended up happening. But of course, it all happens perfectly as it's meant to. There came a point where after he got out of the military, he'd been out, he was the stay-at-home dad. So we decided we're gonna do things differently. I'm gonna work. I'm gonna focus on my career. We had our now high schoolers were just little. They were just little toddlers, and that was working out. That was working out. It was working out well enough. But at that time, we had a lot of coping mechanisms that were keeping us going and keeping the status quo. For me, that became my work. I would just bury myself in work. And for him, his whole identity was like, I'm a great dad. And which I'm sure some of your listeners can relate to this as well. But both of us not knowing how much of ourselves we hadn't fully owned and expressed yet. So when he went through those 2.5 years of depression and disability, like the man that I was used to being strong and resilient and crazy out there doing handstands next to the cliff, that was the kind of guy that I always knew him as, would do the impossible. He couldn't even change a diaper or take out the trash because he was in so much pain. So he got into video games and I got deeper into work. But then there just came a point during that time where I was actually pregnant with our fourth child, and I developed this autoimmune disorder. They thought it was related to the pregnancy, but after our baby was born, it actually got worse. So that continued for another year, and I was just miserable. I felt trapped in my body. I felt trapped in my marriage, in my family, with all these responsibilities. I was the one the breadwinner, and my husband wasn't even my husband anymore. There just came a breaking point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this the way that it is going. I can't continue. I wasn't even sleeping at night more than an hour and a half because I would just be covered in so many boils and sores and things. My sheets would be bloody every time I'd wake up and just oozing skin. It was, I'm like, how do I function? So I started to look for some different ways of looking at things. I was very at the end of my rope. So funny thing is I found Tony Robbins' work online, and that was just enough to kind of get me back up the rope a little bit. And I would listen to his audios, pushing the double stroller every morning to stay motivated, to stay in my life. But anyways, one thing led to another, and I started to get into this more emotional connection, emotional releasing work. And I found a community to do that within. And 8 months later, Ryan got into it too. Those 8 months in between were a lot of resistance because he was very skeptical. Is my wife in a cult? What is she trying to manipulate me into? Is she trying to trick me into changing? So it was a pretty tough time. But when he started to get into this work and tap into his repressed rage and grief and all of those years of unexpressed, unfelt emotions, that's when the real healing began. So since then, it's been quite a journey of that.
Interesting, because I'd often see this, and I've experienced it myself, where one of the individuals in the relationship will begin this healing process or begin a process of self-development or beginning to develop their self-awareness and looking to improve themselves and get better. And over time, they begin to venture down this new path in their life. And there is a disconnect that's created from them and their partner, because the partner either is not interested in that, or the partner is, as you mentioned, resistant to it. Again, as you mentioned there about your husband, had feelings that maybe you're trying to change him or trying to fix him in some way. But eventually he did join you. And I don't know what the statistics are in terms of one person doing the work and the other person will eventually follow, or one person does the work and eventually leaves the marriage or leaves the relationship. I don't know how that works out generally, but
yeah, from
your own experience, from your own perspective, how can we bring that person with us? Or do we even?
That's a common question, Gavin.
Yeah.
The tricky part is, and this is what I didn't know back then, because there was truth to his feelings. There was a validity to his feelings of me wanting to fix him, because I did want to fix him. I wanted him to change. I wanted him, but the deeper desire of my heart was to feel free, was to feel at peace and to feel happy, no matter what he was doing or not doing. I just couldn't see that at the time. So even throughout the journey in these past 7-8 years, the big turning point in our relationship was when we both stopped trying to fix each other. Because when he got into doing this work, it was equally him trying to coach me. and that just didn't work either way. The real magic happens when you can be honest with yourself about, I want my partner to be on this journey. I want him to be as excited about the growth and the healing, but not having an attachment to them doing it. Like, I accept what is regardless. You don't make anybody do anything. You can't. You can at best inspire them with just who you are being, not I'm going to be this so that he will do that. But that is actually the way that we now keep inspiring each other to keep growing, because we are on our very, very intimate personal journeys, both of us. And then we have the journey that is ours.
Yeah. So you believe you always need to bring it back to yourself?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man or woman.
I agree with that. Yeah. So then when it comes to, let's go with the topic of intimacy at the moment. When it comes to intimacy in today's world, what's creating some of the barriers there for these couples and relationships when it comes to being intimate?
Oh, that's a great question. So on the surface, I think that the way that it manifests, right, is in addictions. Things like the most common ones that I hear from men and from their partners are things like porn, video games, work, just really drowning themselves in work. What's another one? Let's see. Sometimes just really hyper fixating on their bodies. But basically, whatever form that takes, beneath the surface, what's happening is that there is a fear of really being seen. So whatever ways and also as women, whatever ways men or women choose to distract ourselves from seeing what's really there and letting it be seen, it's that to me is the biggest barrier to intimacy, is just not allowing ourselves to be seen. Because intimacy, I don't remember who originally coined this, but it's into me see. And I can't see you if you won't let me see you, right? I can see beyond the person's bullshit, maybe. I'd be like, oh, I can see what's really happening behind the mask. But but what we really want is for the other person to open their hearts and expose willingly. And that's where that intimacy is created. And when that sense of safety and trust is really there, all of the sexual connection and excitement and passion thrives from that. Otherwise, it's like a forced, almost like performative kind of sexual connection.
Yeah. And then the connection through sex is almost a distraction from connecting to each other outside of that experience as well. So there's no connection.
Yeah, it can be
outside of the bedroom, and both people believe that if we're having sex, then things must be okay, things must be pretty good, but you feel that there's a disconnect there, and neither one is being honest about it, and neither one, again, two people may have their guards up, as you mentioned, because of previous shaming from times when they expressed themselves to people who were in pain or people who are traumatized and received quite a negative reaction from it. So how do you open up that conversation?
It is a scary conversation to open up. I'm not going to lie. How
was it for you?
It was messy. It was messy. However, what I will say is this. So just like you said, sex can be a distraction from, like, give you like a sense of connection. It can also be just enough of a glimpse of that connection to be the portal into a deeper connection. Let's call it that. Because for us, that was the initial opening. That was the thing that kept us actually more connected through our messy season of figuring out our emotions and being real and raw and honest. As much as we would fight, we're not people who can have makeup sex or just have sex and forget about our fight. Like, we actually both, we learned this about ourselves. We both need to feel emotionally safe and connected. For his dick to get hard and for me to be ready to be penetrated, that has to be there. And so the thing is that when you recognize that the act of sex itself can only take you so far, it has its thresholds, but it can be an opening into something deeper if you bring that awareness to it. So for us, what that looked like initially was having conversations about our fantasies. When this really began opening was, okay, what turns you on? What gets you what gets your juices flowing? What's exciting for you? Even if you don't ever want it to happen in real life, because there are some fantasies that are way hotter just in your head and not in real life. That's something that a lot of people discover when they start trying things in real life. Like, the fantasy is ruined because it's nothing like I thought it was going to be. But having those conversations and being present with the judgment that comes up when we have those conversations, like, ooh, no, that's kind of disgusting, or I feel like ick. Like, why would you want that? But that's a part of letting ourselves be seen in all of the scary parts that we are the most afraid of being judged and rejected for. So the more that we started to do that and then work through the process of, okay, let me just sit with this for however long I need to process what you just told me. But we would always come back to each other and come back together and find some kind of the common ground, the common vision that we have for our relationship. And that helped a lot. It was like a soothing balm in all of the chaos of our emotional and spiritual healing process.
Yeah, I can imagine that there was potentially a lot of deal breakers within that period of time when the two of you were so disconnected. And for many couples, again, in relationships or marriages, those deal breakers would be the breakup of the relationship. How did you manage to switch a deal breaker into an actual process where you could begin to move together again, or come together again?
Yeah. Just like you said earlier, it comes back to the self. So in each of those situations, we would have to go deeper into ourselves, confront the abandonment wounds, the intense fear of being alone, the fear of like, oh my God, I'm going to lose everything, my entire reality. What are people going to think? Just going into those places in ourselves, very intentionally, and being so present with the discomfort and the pain and the angst and the uncertainty. And only when we were individually willing to do that, because otherwise we would just blame the other person. You made me feel this way. You make me feel like I'm not good enough. You this, you that. But where is that wound? And then we could bring that into the conversation again, so we could be seen, not just be seen in our wound, but be seen in our heart, like the deeper heart desire. Like, what I want is to feel safe with you. I want to feel desired by you. I want to feel like you got me. I want to feel like we got each other's backs, like no matter what's happening out in the world and the external. And we were able, for us in our relationship, to again bring it back to this shared vision that we have for life. And sometimes I will say, Gavin, the things that we thought were deal breakers, the things that we thought were big issues, were actually not an issue at all. It's just that we were looking at it through a particular lens of our trauma or of our whatever, our wounds. That when we could see things through love, some of those things just like took care of themselves. And this is where the weird magical shit that you can't explain happens, in that space of surrendering something. I know that that's a little bit esoteric.
No,
that's kind of the realm I like to play in.
It's interesting. No, but there's something in that where I was on one of my recent podcasts, and the individual on the podcast mentioned a statistic where, I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere around 67% of problems in a marriage do not get resolved.
Right, the unsolvable problems.
67% of successful marriages, I should add there. 67% 67% of problems in successful marriages do not get resolved. So he then begged the question that, okay, well, why are these marriages a success? Well, it's because they've learned to manage the problems. Would you back that up?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And usually also with that, those problems are not like in your face all the time, ever present problems usually either. It might be a little nagging, like he likes to leave his laundry on the floor and I like him to pick it up, but for some couples, when they find that there's actually an incompatibility, that's a different conversation. Like, for example, I've had some couples where the deeper they go in their whole journey of self-discovery and self-expression and self-actualization, that one realizes that they really do want to be in multiple committed relationships and the other one really doesn't. And if they're both really true to their hearts, and that's not going to be compatible unless that's something that they're willing to somehow, compromise around or work around. But so again, it depends on what kind of unsolvable problems we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, there's certain non-negotiables, isn't there?
I think there are. I wouldn't call them non-negotiables. I would call there's integrity. So if I'm in integrity with myself and with my heart and with who I am, and something that you want is in conflict with that, then I would be breaking integrity with myself to be that or agree to that. So there's that. That is always changing, shifting, expanding, the further we go along on our journey. So that if we call them our non-negotiables, those can also shift throughout the course of our lives. But yeah, I think it's most important to be attuned to what is actually true for me. What is my heart? What is not just what am I saying no to out of fear, but what am I saying no to out of honoring myself? And there's a difference.
Being completely honest with yourself, isn't it? Am I oversimplifying that statement?
Well, yeah, being honest with yourself and seeing how much of it is also being honest with yourself about how much is coming from your wounding, how much is coming from your fear.
Just for the listeners, how do you know?
So very physically, for me, my experience in my body feels different when something is coming from a grounded yes or no, like truth with a big T, like truth. Versus when I feel it's like more of a grounded but like expansive energy. And when it comes from this wounded little girl who's afraid of being, abandoned or rejected or second best, whatever, it feels contracted. I feel it in a different part of my body, usually in my stomach. That's where I feel the things. And it feels like a ball of energy. So I think one of the most fundamental things to be attuned to, men or women, is like what's happening in your body, in your energy. Are you contracting? Are you expanding? Are you, because you can feel afraid, it's a different energy of actual fear, but you can feel like, I don't know what's on the other side of this if I say yes, and feel an expanded energy about it. Or you can feel like a fear and a contraction. So I would bring it back to the body first.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I've recently gone back to therapy, but I'm tapping into some more of that somatic work. And the question always being, where do I feel in my body? Which is never I've done lots of therapy over the years, but it's never a question that was ever asked of me through previous therapists. Yeah. You've had this experience, so and we talk it through, and then she asked me where I feel in my body, and I'm thinking, what? What's the matter where I feel in my body? It's like, well, your body, and I understand now, of course, but your body holds the trauma. Your body keeps score. So
yeah,
it's very interesting. And then just sitting with that, and that's something extremely difficult to do. And with the work that I do with the men, the one thing I recommend to do every single day, every single man I work with, is you've got to cultivate a period of time every single day where you're alone. with your thoughts and your
Yeah.
feelings. No
Yes.
distractions, no noise. You switch off the external voices or the external noise, and then you turn up the automatically the internal volume is turned up, and then you can start paying attention to what's going on within you. And I'm a big advocate for some breathing exercises along with some journaling, which helps massively, and it's something I've done over the years. So is that a similar approach that you would take, or are we missing a key component there when it comes to actually releasing some of this trauma through your body?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those pieces are very important, and they've been a part of our journey as well. One thing that I think was more a little less common is this whole concept of, basically, if you think of the masculine and feminine energies, right? To not confuse people, this is not that mean male and female. It does not mean that. We all have both of these energies to different harmonious combination. But you can see it in nature. It's like the sun is associated with masculine energy, the moon is associated with feminine. They're and yet they all work as one. It's all in union. It's how it naturally is. But in us, so a lot of times the collectively men are very disconnected from their inner feminine. And so you see this all the time, and like, no, boys don't cry. We don't cry about it. Don't feel like, just keep it together, man, keep it together. And this is one of the biggest wounds in the men that I work with, is that they feel this burden that is not theirs to carry, that they're supposed to be the ones to hold the space all the time. And they have no space, no wiggle room to ever lose their shit. So one thing that I would say, and this is something that helped Ryan tremendously, was intentionally losing his shit in his own space. Every day. He did this every single day for the first almost year and a half of his beginning to awaken. He realized that he was not as, he realized that he had a lot more anger than he thought he did. But that's really where the gold was. That's where the gift was. And when he worked with all of these different layers of self-judgment and self-loathing and criticism, and when he was able to release that in himself, he was able to release that towards me and not project that onto me, and vice versa. So that is what some coaches will call, men descending into their feminine. Like, you've got to descend into that feeling, that intensity, fullness of feeling, that full feminine range of feeling. It's fucking wild, okay? And to be able to be truly grounded and rooted in your truth. Otherwise, there's these feelings that we're always going to kind of be avoiding and afraid of. So whatever that might look like, I think that the most natural, it seems, go-to feeling when men allow themselves to really feel is the anger, is the rage. For women, we tend to go straight into sadness and kind of like victimhood. That's the shadow of that. So giving that space to exist and giving that space to be expressed so that you no longer have to be afraid of your own intensity. That in and of itself is really powerful.
So how did he lose his shit? What was the strategy there?
Oh yeah. So he had a process. He actually had a process. And I think he still has the app subscription for men if anyone is interested in this. But you go through a process of questions that help reflect back to you what you're triggered about and the deeper truths beneath that. But before you go deep into the mental part of it, you get into the feeling part of it. So he would start with fuck yous. If he was mad at me or mad about something one of the kids did, he would go into his closet and he would make his process about that. You work with the triggers that are already present, because believe me, life gives you plenty. So pick one, pick one a day.
A metaphorical closet now, yes.
We need literal closet.
A literal closet.
He literally went into the closet. We at our old house, we had our own walk-in closet. Like, he had one, I had one. So his closet, it was big enough. It was like a little room. And and he would just beat the shit out of this pillow. He would scream into it. He would scream and snot and just fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, and fuck you for this and that, and just letting it come out. But doing it in this container. It's like a ceremony even, it's a ritual. You're not waiting until the last straw and then all of that shit comes out at a person. I had to learn to do the same because I've learned that I have a lot of potential for just wrath. And when I started to tap into that, it came out at him, and that was completely misdirected. So I had to also learn to do that same thing. And I've done a lot of it.
And then we wonder why it's mostly males in prison and mostly males that are
and the suicide rates and
yes,
mental health, yes,
all of that, and all that is a lot of that is sourced with that internal rage or anger that they can't get in touch with or fail to get in touch with,
and that we feel ashamed of.
You feel ashamed of it, yeah, big time, yeah. What's sacred masculinity or sacred masculine? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah. So when I talk about the sacred masculine or the sacred feminine, it's like this. It's, again, not the gender roles of men, like male and female bodies, right? It's this presence, this energy. It's more of like a spiritual law, we'll call it, of the divine union that happens. So those who are not wouldn't consider themselves spiritual. Okay, like I'm not into all the spirituality stuff. Like, that's okay. Some of this languaging may not resonate, but for me, it's that divine father presence and the divine mother presence. I have such a deep and intimate connection with it that I've had all my life. But early on, when I was a pastor's daughter, when my parents, became Christian and they got it deep into the religion, Southern Baptist, evangelical, I felt a disconnection from that innate union, let's call it, because it became very much about this punitive God that is waiting for you to fuck up, and you can't trust your heart, and your heart is deceitful, and you're born of sin. And so I had a lot of things to deconstruct before I could connect with that divine essence. So it's this universal love. And the qualities of the sacred masculine, or the masculine, just the masculine, is very much that containment, not control, but this containment of this space where you feel safe. It's a space of safety. It's grounded. It's empty. It's everything and nothing all at once. The feminine is the fullness that fills that space. So they work so in union together. She is the full range of emotions, expression. She's not logical. She's there to be experienced and witnessed and seen and beholden. And he is there to witness. So,
but that can also work. That can also be vice versa, though, isn't it?
In men and women, yes. Yeah. Men can embody that feminine very strongly in some moments, even if they are primarily more at home in their masculine essence, let's call it. So again, this is not limited to what body you have, but everyone has a different, like if we had to put a number on it, for example, for me, I feel most at home when I'm like 3/4 in my feminine and about like 1/4 to 1/3 in my masculine. So I honor that I need the structures and the containment to create and flow within. That includes those boundaries and those foundations. Otherwise, if the feminine has no masculine containment, she's all over the place. The masculine is direction and focus and vision and clarity, getting things done, initiating. And when you think about this in like the ancient, the yin and yang, one is receptive and one is penetrating. So it's that same kind of thing. You just put different wordings and apply it to a different context or time.
So as both of you began to grow and progress and heal and connect on a deeper level, how did that have a ripple effect to the people in your life at the time? Now, of course, I'm sure it had a significantly positive impact on your children. but I'm pretty sure it came with some negative consequences too. That be true?
Yeah, I mean, there was fallout. Yeah, there were people that we no longer resonated with, or that didn't resonate with us. It's like we broke the agreement of we're on the same page about this, and we kind of went rogue. We went into the wilderness, and yeah, that did ruffle a lot of feathers. We did experience a lot of disconnection from our parents, our families. That has since been reconciled and begun to reconnect and really see each other's hearts. But it was just such a wild journey, even with our kids, actually. They saw us in our messiest parts of the journey. So they also, especially our teenagers, the little kids, they're just, consciously couldn't be aware of what was happening, but they have gotten to heal with us, our teenagers, and learn how to trust, learn how to, how to open their hearts and how to follow what their hearts really want, and how to not people please. Mm-hmm. And how to be assertive and be bold and all those things. So, yeah, I think that in the bigger picture, as anyone begins to be more true to who they really are, when they begin discovering who that really is, you're going to just naturally move away connection-wise and energetically from the people that don't resonate, that don't align with that. And then you're going to attract more people that do resonate with that. And so we have found some really beautiful new friendships and communities where that energy is reciprocated. And we feel that connection and that emotional intimacy and spiritual intimacy with people that we didn't have before, even when we were in church.
Do you get a lot of pushback from the content you post?
Not anymore. I think back in 2019,
you don't listen to it.
No, I think now the people that are there, or the people that come across it, they're like, okay, yeah, they have this understanding with the universe that this is coming to me for a reason, and it's not a coincidence. Mm-hmm. But 4 years ago, when I started to post more openly and be more bold and what I share, there was a lot more fallout. Yeah, because again, people were used to seeing this version of me, and all of a sudden they felt betrayed. Like, who is this woman? I don't know her. Yes. I can't trust her.
I can relate quite strongly to that. Yes, for sure. And because you have this other identity that you've broken free from, isn't it? And people can't recognize with this new identity. But yeah, it's so you, isn't it, this time?
Yeah.
Whereas before, the identity was tied up in the pain and the trauma from the past.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's that.
When it comes to women in today's world, now, as I said to you earlier, like the majority of the listeners here are men.
Uh-huh.
And I understand that there's a lot of women quite repressed when it comes to sex, maybe quite closed off, quite shameful, especially when it comes to orgasms, or completely allowing themselves to just let go in those scenarios. And I understand that the woman has to do the work on herself to be able to open up her heart and to be completely free from the shame that she feels in those situations. But from a man's perspective, is there anything we can do to accommodate this for her?
Yeah, there is. Although, yes, I really want to emphasize that part, that she has to, at some point, just be willing to go into this stuff herself. For me, having my own self-pleasure practice was the key. It was the key. No matter how much he did, ultimately I did that. But what he did in that was he gave me his full support. He encouraged that. He wasn't insecure about it. He didn't feel offended that, oh, if she's masturbating, it's going to take away from me. That type of thing. Can I watch? Yeah. And then even that, when I was like, no, I need some time to unravel my shame.
Yeah.
And like, it's not pretty, dude. It's not pretty. It's not like a porn. But even then, like, actually, one big thing that men can do to support their partners, their female partners in this case, is being so patient, but also not withholding their invitation. So what I see a lot, and what I've experienced as well in my marriage, is that when a man is met with a no enough times, he will stop asking. And that's just complete erotic rusher right there. That's when we see people turning to other ways to cope, and porn, and alcohol, and affairs, when they no longer feel like it's safe enough to even express a desire to their partner without feeling like they're going to be met with disgust. Or, because disgust, that's a whole different level of rejection. Like, oh, get off of me. Like, is this all you want from me is sex? So if there's one of the things that I would recommend for men is to make it more of a practice, not a one-time thing. I did the thing and she didn't like it, so that didn't work. But making it a practice to actually open his heart to his woman. And for example, I'm gonna give you an example. Having and not out of the blue, like you're watching TV and you're like, hey, I want to have sex more, but just want you to know, but being very intentional and mature and conscious about this, and telling her, okay, there's something I would like to talk with you about, and I'm nervous about it, and it's really vulnerable for me, and I want to make sure that our full attention can be on this conversation. So when would be a good time to have that conversation? And that way he's not self-sabotaging at 11 p.m. at night, asking her when she's fucking tired and has to wake up at 5 a.m. with a baby, and then saying, see, it didn't work. So be conscious about that and intentional. And another thing is that when she says no, whatever place that's coming from, if it's wounding or if it's like a sacred, truthful no, honoring herself, wherever that no comes from, for him to have an attitude and maybe even say, thank you for taking care of yourself. And what that does is it helps her to trust him more, that she's safe to say no. And here's the ironic thing about women. I see this with nearly every single couple I've worked with. When she feels free to say no without being guilted or feeling resented, she wants to say yes more. She begins to say yes more. It's this weird paradoxical thing. We can explain it in a million different ways psychologically, but I don't know if you've seen that or experienced that, but
well, she feels safe enough not
to say no.
Yeah. She knows she's not going to be met with a critical, wounded little boy, that's going to
who takes it personally. He's taking it personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important. What if no, I'm a dad. I've got a daughter who's heading into her teenage years. You have a couple of teenagers there. From a dad's perspective, onto a teenage daughter, how can I, and again, there's a lot of dads listening to this podcast too, how can I best navigate her as she moves through the next 6 years of her life, especially as her hormones begin to change, as interests begin to change, she maybe begins to explore that these are the things in her life. From a dad's perspective, give me some advice here, will you, Luci?
Oh, this is juicy. This is a juicy one, Kevin. Oh my God. I will say that for us, our two teenage girls are a year apart. So they went through like the hormone shifts and getting their periods and getting their bras like within a year of each other. It felt like it was not nonstop. It was like back when they were teething as toddlers. One's done, the other one's getting started. One's getting the toilet figured out, the other one's about, anyways. So for us, the toughest years were actually the middle school, the preteen years, like 11, 12, for whatever reason, well, their hormones are really ramping up. As soon as they both got their periods, it actually got a lot easier. But one thing that any dad could do that will just make things just bring more ease into your relationship is understanding a little bit more about her cycle. It's just a woman's cycle, period. And recognizing that in those 5 days in particular before a period, she will likely be illogically upset about things, and you don't need to fix it. And not just in those, we call it's the late luteal phase of the cycle. There's a lot of resources on this on the internet. If anybody wants to learn more about this, not just for your daughters, but also for your partners, it'll serve you greatly. But throughout her whole navigating her new womanhood, one thing to keep in mind is that you don't need to fix her. And this is so perfectly reflected in how men approach their partners as well. Our second oldest daughter, she's the most like me. And when I was in high school, I would get wildly emotional, but I wasn't allowed to feel it openly. So I would tuck it away and I would cope some other ways. I would run more. I would do more. I would kind of like beat my body into submission. Our daughters have freedom to feel. So sometimes it gets fucking intense. And one of the biggest things for me too, as the mother for both of us, is to just be able to witness her and hear her. And again, the feminine just wants to be witnessed and heard more times than she wants to actually be offered a solution. And so the practice of just listening to your daughter and letting her body, her just thematically learn that it's safe to feel around you without being met with resistance, without being met with what's wrong with you. Here's how, let me fix you because your feelings make me so uncomfortable. I need to make it stop. So how do I make it stop? And that makes her, some part of her inside just want to shut down around her dad. Mm. And we've personally been there with both of them and then kind of worked our way out of that situation. So
are you optimistic about the future for human connection and intimacy and relationships with the rise of artificial intelligence and the ever pervasive temptations to find connections in fantasy and virtual reality?
I am optimistic. I think that what I am noticing is more of a wave of people waking up to their hearts. And I don't know what role everything is going to play with the artificial intelligence. It could go in so many different directions. It could be really supportive of intimacy and connection even. It could be used, it all depends. You know, it's less about the activity or the thing itself, and more about the level of consciousness that you bring to it. And so, yeah, I'm seeing more and more people wake up. Yeah. I know there's a lot of corruption and weird government shit and things and environmental things, but if we each really truly devote ourselves to what we can do, and as you see me talk a lot, I'm sure on my page, just actually embodying the love and the truth and the integrity in the way that we're actually here to do, that is changing things. That is having a really powerful ripple effect.
I think it's an interesting paradox where the rise of artificial intelligence is actually combining with the rise of psychedelics or the rise of therapy or the rise of self-development work, self-care.
Yeah.
I think it's quite fitting at the moment how that is actually the two of them are sort of evolving at a similar rate. And I think there's a reason for that. You know, people do want to reconnect to what matters.
Yeah. They want to feel that connection and the connection in themselves.
Is there anything that you haven't mentioned here or haven't spoken about here that you feel needs to be spoken about? Is there anything that you've potentially left on the table there that needs to be said, needs to be put out there to help men and women connect on a deeper level?
I mean, there's always a lot we have to leave on the table unless we talk all day. But no, I think that the piece is, if someone listening really takes what they've already heard and lets it sink in, and doesn't just listen, but actually commits to those practices and that way of treating each other and showing up, that's the way that we don't leave things on the table, is by actually taking action on them, and trusting that whatever gaps in knowledge, or like, how do I navigate this season or situation, trusting that the tools for that will be available to you when you need them, the resources, the people, the mentors, the books, whatever, and to stay open to the possibility of those tools and resources coming in ways that you may not have expected.
Mm-hmm. We've spoken about non-negotiables when it comes to relationships and potential deal breakers. Do you and your husband have certain non-negotiables when it comes to the continual growth and progress of your relationship right now?
Again, I wouldn't say none. And now, if you would have asked me this 3 years ago, I would have given you a list of non-negotiables. Be like, and he can't do this, and if I do this, and he does that.
Well, it's not even that, but that there's a non-negotiable that actually enhances the relationship. So, for example, that
so more like a commitment.
Yes, yeah.
The commitment is what we are, well, committed to living. And that is that the commitment ultimately is to love itself. And so again, while this might seem like, kind of sound to some of you listening a little bit out there and esoteric and like, what the fuck is this? But that commitment is to love. And that commitment to love will take us to the edges of where our little ego self is comfortable, and force us beyond what we think we're capable of. And again, this is not in a compromising way to your heart and what you actually, in your integrity. But we have learned there is a big difference between our ego's comfort zone, and our expressed integrity in service to that love. So the commitment is to that. The deeper commitment is to our own journeys with this universe, source, whatever anyone wants to define it as, and trusting each other's connection with that. So yeah, that's the commitment. If there was ever, I will say that I have a deep trust in Ryan, my husband, in his connection to that source, that I trust that if anything ever came up that felt in violation to what my honor and my integrity is, that I can dive straight into the heart of it with him without having to tiptoe around it. And whatever comes from that, and we're both going to be great. We're both going to be fine. I trust that.
Go all in.
Yeah.
It's the message here. Luci, love this conversation. Thank you. And I love the content for many different reasons.
Thank you, Gavin.
Keep it coming. And
for
any of the people listening here, they want to reach out, they want to check out your content, learn more about you, where's best to go and what's best to do?
So you can find me on Instagram at Luci Lampe, and all the current groups and courses, coaching, YouTube, all that stuff will be at lucilampe.com.
Excellent. And you do have, you always seem to have courses happening and coming up.
Yeah. So I've got I think like 20 or 21 courses at this point available. Some for men, actually one for men coming up, some for women, some for couples. And then there's, of course, coaching for those who want to go deeper individually or as a couple.
Sweet. Get on it, people. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin. Thanks for having me here.